Welcome to this edition of Optimal Talks. In this series of frank conversations, I will chat to a diverse range of security specialists and industry influencers to explore their opinions and ideas, picking apart some of the key issues we all face today. I hope you enjoy the next 30 minutes. If you do, leave us your thoughts and comments and spread the word. Thanks. Hello everybody. Today I have the pleasure of catching up online with James Hamilton, guy that I heard speak at the International Protective Security Board's conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, just 2 weeks ago. First time we've met face to face, and kindly agreed to get on an Optimal Talks with me. How are you, James?
Good, Rick. Great being with you. Thanks so much, and thanks for making the time. I appreciate it.
No. What? So it's early morning for you, right?
Yeah, it's like 9 a.m.
Yeah. Sort of afternoon time for us here in the UK. But your presentation and the introduction, I think, was really intrigued me to want to record this session with you. But in the UK, you might be less known. I know you're prolifically well known in the US, but why don't you just tell everybody about your background experience and what the business does now?
Yeah, I went to a military college here in the States, and didn't have to go in the military. It was kind of you were paying for the abuse type of a situation. So I got finished there, and I was looking around, and I really kind of wanted to go into law enforcement. So I was a police officer. Well, actually, I wanted to be in the FBI, and the FBI said we don't hire anyone out of college. And the agent said, go be a cop. And so I was a police officer for 5 years, which was, an unbelievable experience, really set me up for the next chapter. A lot of really good takeaways from that. I think, even though it was 30 years ago, really kind of helped me where I am today. And one of those was the absolute finality of that job, meaning if you lose a friend in the line of duty, it stays with you. And it did. And yeah, it's for real. And it was a very good experience, though tragic at the time. Went to FBI, just like a lot of people, police background, and was, interested in that, what they do, and wasn't overly impressed, I guess. There's the FBI, and then there's the FBI when you're in it. So those are two different things. There's the FBI that people think is the reality, and then there's the reality of it. Very impressed. The training was great. People were great. And I did a lot of really neat things there. Got heavily involved in tactics, was involved in the FBI SWAT program, got involved in close protection, which is very nuanced in the FBI. For people in the UK who are listening, they would think, why would the FBI be doing protection? That's not a thing they do, and it's not, and they're right. That's a Secret Service mission by and large. But very, and I'm very blunt, as you know, federal agencies are very, I wouldn't say egotistical, but there's a lot of pride. And so, for instance, to ask the Secret Service to protect one of the FBIs, they would never do that. There's pride there. So we protected the FBI director and the Attorney General of the United States. Those were the only two protectees we had. And I was fortunate enough to get on the FBI director's protective detail, 24/7, 365 type of close protection unit. And I saw a lot, went all over the world, went to your country a number of times, did a lot of that. And then I got involved in training, ran our overseas survival program. And then I think for your listeners, the thing that was of interest was I created the FBI's standalone close protection school, because there really wasn't one. So I made an 80-hour school that was really just taught to FBI agents. And then that morphed into DEA agents, ATF agents, U.S. Marshals. Anyway, as part of that, I was kind of looking for information. I was very big in common sense. I was very big in looking for outside sources. And I ran across this guy named Gavin DeBecker. For your listeners who don't know him, he wrote a bestseller called The Gift of Fear. And he actually runs a close protection company out of Los Angeles. Yeah, there you go. Protecting the Gift. Yeah,
Protecting the Gift. Yeah, I have that. Yeah.
So he wrote a book called Just 2 Seconds, which was, pretty mind-blowing for me. And I ended up using a lot of his stuff in my training, and then he found out I was doing it. Then we had a bunch of conversations, basically, like you and me, I guess. We're kind of the same person, but we don't really know each other, right? We have the same kind of interest with same kind of passions. Gavin is a very, very close friend. He offered me a job. I went to work for him. I worked for him for 9 years in the Los Angeles area. I was a senior vice president for operations and training. And then in 2024, I started my own deal. It's called the Hamilton Security Group. I'm really a consultant on this very small space, close protection, what it is, how do you do it, what are my options, do I need it? I answer those questions for CEOs and companies. I do a lot of vulnerability and risk assessments for them. I do training for their teams, but it's very nuanced. It's a very small niche area. And that's what I do. And I'm a member of the IPSB, as you know, and love that. And I love giving information to protectors. And really, it's because it's information I never had as an FBI protector. I didn't know anything about time and distance. I just thought you shoot your way out of any problem, which now, as a 56-year-old, it's a totally different optic. And I'm happy for that.
We like to use our brains instead of our brawn, right, these days. So and I'm with you there. My knees couldn't take it these days, and standing in a nightclub till 3 a.m. is absolutely my idea of hell. But I think that we probably have very similar experiences. I at 16 and a half tried to join the police, and they were like, "All right, kid, go and join the army and come back when you're 25." Yeah. And so I did, and by the time I was 25, working in a joint police station with North Yorkshire Police in Catterick, I realized that my job was so much more interesting than being a police officer patrolling the same place, for 30 years, and carried on, which is then when I became close protection trained, then traveled all over Africa and the Middle East. So I'm very much of the same mind as you are, but there are things that I've read that are also that really resonate with me, and some of the blogs on your website, some of the blogs you've got are really, I think, interesting, and they might be focused on executive protection, but I think they span consultancy, and there's a lot more takeaways in it. One I'd like to just explore, you mentioned humility as a strength, and personally, I really believe in that. With some of my clients, heads of security, asking for help is absolutely a sign of strength, and sometimes those that don't ask for help are just burying their heads in the sand. What did you mean when you said that? Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, and it comes out of doing hundreds of vulnerability risk assessments, EP analysis for corporate America. I've done hundreds of them, and the recurring theme was the director of security who had a big ego, who I was only there begrudgingly because his boss said hire James Hamilton or hire Gavin DeBecker. He didn't want me there. And he would tell me, and I used a male, pronoun of he, and usually it was a he, but it was awful lot of, you don't understand what I've done. You don't understand who I am. I'm retired NYPD, or I'm retired FBI, or I'm retired Secret Service, and I don't care. Like, that's all interesting, right? But that's not why I'm here. And I'm not here, and so when you start out with this overconfident individual who's very threatened by an outside review, it's very uncomfortable. And usually those programs aren't very good. And that's, they don't grow either, by the way. They get the report and then they kind of throw it away. Versus you go in, and I've had Secret Service or FBI who are very humble and have said, James, I don't know anything. So, okay, in the US, I don't know how they do in the UK, but Fortune 500, they'll hire somebody, vice president, director of security. Well, they get everything. They get investigations, they get access control, they get EP, they get fixed site security, active shooter. There's no way that they can be competent in all those areas. It's very difficult. So the ones with humility will say, hey, can you come in and assess? Because I don't really know, right? And then what I see from those assessments is an openness and a willingness to get better. And then they actually are part of a dynamic of, hey, James, what do you think? And then you go back in a year and the program's better. Versus the other one, without the humility and with the arrogance, you go back in a year and it's the same shit. If he hasn't been fired, right? Excuse my language. But that's what I mean. And, also from my police days, I was always told, learn something new every day. Don't think you've got it all figured out. And if you learn something new every day, well, that requires humility, right? And I'm also a product of that with regards to, the FBI. I had done close protection all over the world and really thought I knew what I was doing. And then I read this book by Gavin DeBecker, and I'm like, man, I didn't know any of that. I was humble enough to read something and go, wow, shit, I didn't know that. And I wish I had, right? And that takes humility versus, oh, they don't know what they're doing. We're the FBI. arrogance, arrogance, arrogance. So I've always believed in having some humility, and it's a strength. But also have confidence. I think you can't be so humble that you don't have enough confidence to do what needs to be done or have that tough conversation. But yeah, for me, that's a very strong characteristic in a professional.
That's I don't know if you've ever heard of the Kruger-Dunning effect.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's the Kruger-Dunning effect. For those that don't know this theory, an academic theory was that there is effectively a bell curve where you think you know everything, and so you don't go and learn, and that's the danger. But the
yeah,
more you read, the more you realize you don't know, and then there becomes an imposter syndrome where you think that you're not as good as you think you were. I went through this when I left the army
sure.
as a E9, a regimental sergeant major, close protection team leader, came into private security, and then started a master's degree. And then the first essay I wrote, I think I scraped a 53%. I passed like by the skin of my teeth. And everything I wrote in it, I didn't reference anything because I'd left school at 16 and a half, right? My tutor had written in Reading, says who, says who, says who. And I was like, says me.
Right.
I know what I'm talking about. This is about risk management in close protection. And I'm like, what do you mean says who? Says me. I've been doing this for best part of a decade. And
Yep.
they were like, no, this isn't about you. This is about what you've read. Then I
Mm,
started reading. Obviously, 3 years later, I got my degree, but
nice.
that was humiliating for me because I didn't realize that at the start as a postgraduate. I hadn't just left the army. And I went through this reading other people's articles and books and papers to a point where I was like, geez, I really don't know nearly as much as I ought to know. And then I have an imposter syndrome. And then you read enough and you start having conversation with people and you think, well, actually, I know more than they know. And
Right.
then you come over the top of that bell curve, but you realize you cannot rest on your laurels. You have to keep learning and reading, which is, why I'm sure you're the same. I have so many books that,
Yep.
and I want to keep reading and learning
Yep.
because sometimes you get some real nuggets of information, and especially from conversations like this. I always learn a great deal from conversations like this because different perspectives will challenge your thinking and
That's right.
and help you grow. And if people like you with the IPSB, I think is such a great organization that the amount of people that for pure altruism are giving their personal perspectives for the benefit of others, and when everybody shares, then the whole community gets better. And I think that is the humility that the IPSB shows. I think that's the courage that a lot of the people that come along to those conferences, and we're like 600 and something, it's huge. People come to learn from each other, and I applaud the American market. I applaud them for that. I think the UK market is very similar in that respect in the professional level, but there is still too many that will not turn out and will always um, berate people putting things, articles that they've written or that their thoughts, and they will poo-poo things that people say because it's not their opinion, and that is dangerous. That's
Yeah.
the arrogance I think you were referring to.
Yeah, and I think Churchill said it best. He said that you'll never get where you're going if you stop and throw rocks at the barking dogs. And he's right.
Yes.
That's just noise and consider the source. And I went through this same kind of like you were describing, where when I went private sector, I was afraid. I did have imposter syndrome. Thought, well, I knew what I was doing in the FBI, but this is different. And I might be exposed, right? So you're cautious and all those things. And then the longer, and I tell people this a lot, write an article. Even you might be scared, you might be concerned, write it, put
Yeah.
it out there, have the confidence, right? Because what you'll find, by and large, yes, some people may not agree, but most people don't know a lot. That's what I learned is there really aren't a lot of people who know an awful lot. And the more I write, the more I'm like, yeah, like I'm putting out stuff that is correct,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of anxiety, but you really can't do it for the naysayers. You got to do it because you feel like you have something to say and it'd be helpful. Um, Yeah, that's a big piece of it.
Yeah. I mean, are you okay to talk about Brian Thompson? I know it's
Sure.
kind of raw. It's
Yeah.
only been a year for. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a shocking murder of somebody that was killed for the seat they hold. I
Mhm.
don't think he was murdered because he'd been bad to somebody himself, but the
Yeah.
company he worked for was perceived that way, and Luigi Mangione took it upon himself to punish that business by taking out the top person. I did my
Allegedly.
master's dissertation on the relationship between the protector and the protectee being the CEO. And one of the things I raised was if, and this is on the back of quick background. So on the back of this, um, Professor Tim Quigley from a US university did a 20-year study into the impact of a sudden death of a CEO on the market share, the market value of a business. And what they found was that on the day that it was reported to the markets, they dropped by 5% market wealth, and 30 trading days later, if they had not addressed the problem, that they would be like 15% drop in market investor wealth of that business. And when I was writing my, it was 2015, Christophe de Margerie was killed in his private jet on a Moscow runway. A drunk snowplow driver drove through his jet and it killed him. He was a very effective CEO, and I saw the impact, right? Quigley's research didn't factor in any homicide. It was all sudden death.
Mm.
And now we have Brian Thompson's death, and I wonder, how do you recruit a new CEO for a business where your predecessor was murdered because of what your business does? Has UnitedHealthcare got a new CEO? Oh God, I'm sure they're paying them double and
Yeah.
and with a significant protective detail. I mean, what are the key that you were a commentator on this? What are the key takeaways that have changed the operating cycle in the US because of that?
Yeah. One is, and I say this openly, that wasn't an EP problem because there
No,
was no EP present.
no,
Right. Now that that is a better question. Why weren't there EP present? That's
right,
a better question, right? Unfortunately, what happens in the US, I don't know how they do it in the UK, but in the US, it's unlike the government where the president can't waive coverage, right? There's a thing called waive coverage, as I'm sure you're aware, where a protectee will say, I don't need you. Basically, I've done my own risk assessment. You guys stay in the house or stay in the car or stay in the hotel.
yeah,
Well, when you're paying your way, when you're paying for it, as they do on the private sector in the US, they can waive coverage.
yeah,
That's their right. They're paying
uh-huh,
for it. Now, the question would be, do you listen to them? That's a protector. Because this isn't the government, right? In the government, you cannot waive coverage. My protectees could not say, James, I don't need you. I would just disobey them and I would continue to stay with them.
yeah,
But on the private side, they do this every single day,
yeah.
right? Now, there's a bunch of reasons why protectees waive coverage, and I can talk about that for hours.
Oh yeah,
But suffice it to say, Brian Thompson did not have coverage that day. And as I tell CEOs, you're only targeted three ways: group, random, or individually. Group, random, individually. Random is wrong place, wrong time. Group is Jews in Australia at Bondi Beach.
right.
Individual is Brian Thompson. Now, are you targeted because of your CEO position, or are you targeted because of a personal thing going on where you're being stalked by your mistress's husband or something, right? There's some personal
Yeah,
crap
yeah,
always going on. So we think for him it was the former, right? Well, if you read Luigi's diary, he says that. He says it's about insurance. It's about United Health. He
yes,
didn't know Brian Thompson per se.
yeah,
So Brian Thompson's targeted because of his position. Right. Now, I would see you said the reason why United Health can get another CEO is because they're going to pay a lot of money and I love what you said, they're going to increase his protection. Yeah. What the hell does that mean? Right? Like you
uh-huh,
say
uh-huh,
that in America, and I can tell you right now, there's no definition of that. Right? Like,
right.
right. Yeah, we'll say it. It sounds good, but is it really? Did we really increase it? What does that even mean? Did you tell the new CEO you can't waive coverage? Are you using a vendor or an employee model? Because that matters. And here's what I mean by that. In the US, again, I don't know how I think you all do it this way, but if you're an employee of United Health, versus a vendor for United Health, it's different. Here's what I mean. You're protecting the CEO and you're a vendor. And he says, I'm going to this public appearance. I don't need you. You stay here. And you are a vendor and your boss says you never leave a protectee alone to go to a private appearance. And you go with him. And if he fires you, I'll get you another job. I'll put you on another client.
Yeah.
If you're an employee of United Health, and your salary, your stock, your 401k, your healthcare really has a significant, this CEO can affect that. When he says you stay, I don't need you, what are you gonna do? You're probably gonna stay, right? So I'm not saying the employee model is wrong. I'm not saying the vendor model is right. I like them both depending on the situation. And I talk to CEOs about this very thing. This is what my job is. But one of the things that we've seen, to answer your question more succinctly, is right after Brian Thompson, yes, companies were concerned. Yes, companies saw stock go down. But yes, I think American companies especially, they don't want their CEO to die. They're not callous. Like they really do want, but the problem is they don't know, right? So in the UK, I could go say, I want a coast protection team. Well, the very first thing would be, are they SIA licensed? Do you have a national license? We have no such thing here. Nothing like that, right? So some company says, well, I'll hire a bunch of Navy SEALs because that sounds fun. But okay, maybe they know something about close protection. I don't know. Maybe they don't.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it is a real minefield,
Yeah, and I think to your point, in the UK, we do have corporate EP teams, and they are employed, and they build a great dyadic relationship with their principal and the outer office, because that's equally as important, because they're part of the team, and they make everything smoother and easier. And I think you did a brilliant blog about, the value of time and what time can bring from having an EP team that knows what your schedule is, what you like, how you get you there. The protection is wrapped in a dressing of other benefits, right? And that's the value add. And I worked with ambassadors and generals in all manner of nasty places. That was the most important thing, was that you were there to get them to the next place on time. Don't want them thinking about the dangerous stuff. Right. So we have EP teams, and the principal has an obligation to accept that as part of the role, that because they are a figurehead and they know the impact of their, the reputational loss or the embarrassment, let alone, death or injury. So there is an obligation. But then we do also have, temporary, a risk-based approach where a CEO is not in a divisive sector like, insurance or banking these days. Anybody that's making money off something is going to attract some environmental activism. So it's sometimes it's more a risk-based approach. So you're going to hold an AGM, so we need to protect that from protest and activism, or we're going to a country which is more fragile than we're used to operating in. So you need, you don't want to be using local taxis that are unknown. Right. You go to not just third world countries, but certain countries with a criminal fraternity that would take advantage. So it's a risk-based approach. That's where the companies like us would come in and provide that protection on a short-term basis when you don't want to employ somebody. And I think you're right, both work, but it's horses for courses. And to your point as well about, what horses for courses, if in the UK, the SIA license, there are grandfathered rights. Does that make sense to you in US? So, Royal Military Police Close Protection, the Royalty and Specialist Protection Command, so ministers and royal family, and Special Forces personnel, if they've done Protective Security 1 and 2, which means they've been trained in close protection. Because a lot of my friends that were in SF would get absolutely bored out of their brains doing some of the stuff that I've dealt with. And that's as big of a risk sometimes in distraction and becoming, disengaged. This is why I think policing in the UK, certainly close protection, has always been a policing model, a policing role. Royal Military Police, RAF Police, Royal Marines Police or the Metropolitan Police or, police constabularies around the country that will have protection trained people to look after visits when they come in. So because the policing element, that influence and the soft skills is equally as important as the hard skills of, managing that risk event when it happens.
Right.
We prefer to mitigate that. And that's where something you said in one of your things, that deterrence is the first. It was one of your articles about active shooter. Now, we have other types of marauding terrorist attack, but active shooter is, how you cope with that is something that I won't have to deal with nowadays. But deter, delay, detect, deny, respond. The deterrence is always the first line in security. If we can stop it happening, first of all, then we don't have to worry about other things, right? So if is that your understanding, deterrence is the principle of security?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially violence like that, when you're talking active shooter, active threat, something that we deal with daily, it's just, because of our situation with more guns than people in our country and the lack of real consequences for shooting up a place, there really aren't, extreme consequences.
Right.
And everyone does it. It's a copycat effect. Deterrence is everything. Because here's what happens, and I just had a consultation this week on this very thing. You have some type of employee that's been fired, and they make some type of, threat or some type of, futuristic, I'm going to get you type of thing. And then what do? They initially respond with armed security at the site. And then I always ask, well, how long are you going to keep that up? Well, we'll see how it goes after a couple of weeks. What are they saying, really? They're saying it's very expensive. If nothing happens in a couple of weeks, we're probably going to cut it back because, it's probably nothing. Okay, well, these guys have long memories. I mean, I can give you case study after case study of guys who came back, 10, 8 years after the grievance. They have long memories. So instead of putting in, this kind of nonsense, I think if it's just temporary, I think armed security is a deterrence for a fixed site if they're there daily, meaning everyone sees them, everyone that works there sees them, and everyone that comes into the business sees them. I think that can and definitely is a deterrent for a fact, because the statistics on that in the U.S., 74% of active shooters come through the front door, period.
Yeah.
All right, so they're open to business, or they have the card key because they're an insider, they work there. So if you have a very, observant and prepared security person in the front lobby, that is a deterrent. And, we can have the gunfight right there versus letting him, like the NFL, let him get in and raise havoc. But what I tell people, companies, is you also have to train the employees. And this is what I do. I do personal security awareness training for employees. Why? Well, because they are the first line of defense. They are going to see, hear, feel. They, are told in the U.S., see something, say something. Well, what the hell does that mean? Right? Like, that sounds cool, but what do you mean? And then I tell them what that means. Like, legit suspicion, curiosity, intuition. What is actual suspicious behavior? And then that's what you're reporting. And once you've reported it, what's your plan? Like, get down to the brass tacks. What is your real plan? Now you're getting into a deterrent mindset, right? And at least we're ahead of the curve for when the guy walks in with a gun versus I have no training, no one told me anything, and now John from accounting standing there with a pistol. Well, I got no shot now because I don't know what to do, right? So deterrence is everything. We just don't do a good job of it. We do a lot. California is doing a better job because it's required now that you give that type of training to employees, but we're still behind the curve a lot. And in the U.S., it's going to happen because of the way our society is, because of the gun laws, because of our freedoms. It is just our reality. But yeah, I certainly believe, and I know there's case studies where, you have some deterrent factor outside, and that's the same thing for close protection. That does stop people. As I referred to in my case study, George Wallace, the George Wallace killing. I mean, Arthur Bremer talks about that. There is a deterrent factor, so close protection teams that are aware and are doing a good job and creating space and are vigilant, they deter attacks. They do. It's a fact.
We Yeah, and I suppose in an EP sense, it might deter. We talk about crime, and we talk about security culture in business, and it will deter it happening there, but generally speaking, it will displace it. So,
Mm,
when we're not talking about a targeted, assassination attempt, but generally crime will just get displaced to someone
mhm.
else. So essentially, what we're trying to be is not the weakest target.
That's right.
But the insider threat thing, I think, is really important. And what you're talking about is a security culture, so that everybody feels like they own a little bit. In the UK, we have a health and safety laws, and if it's everybody's responsibility to report a torn carpet that somebody can trip over, or a slip hazard, or falling from height. But when we see somebody lifting computers out and they're like struggling with the door, our first idea is that we hold the door open for them. When I do penetration testing, that's the social engineering, that we manipulate people because they want to be polite
Right.
instinctively. And I think Americans are very polite mostly, and British people are stupidly polite in a lot of respects, to the point where even though they think, well, that's odd, they won't challenge it. And that's what we need to instill,
Yep.
is the this. If it doesn't seem right, then
Right.
don't be scared to challenge. Sorry, who are you? We call that the
Right.
power of hello.
Yeah.
And security officers, um, that are at front of house, you're absolutely right. A good, smart, well equipped, friendly, and confident security officer is a deterrent. But just having a security officer is not a deterrent, because if
Correct.
they're stood there looking like a slob on their
Yep.
phone, that is actually the opposite. That will
Yep.
encourage me to take that place on, because you are the soft target. So I think that's a very good example, and very similar to where we are. While I'm on the insider threat piece, active shooter aside, I mean, how important of a priority is that within US business? Is it a problem, insiders? Because we've got
Hmm.
a UK, we've got a lot of hostile state actors now. Our government has been very proactive in telling business, you need to be aware of insider threats, because nations that want to do us harm are actively using proxies and infiltration, coercing, bribing, blackmailing people
Yep.
in your businesses to do commit crimes on their
Yep.
behalf.
Yeah, I would say that companies do. It's really not. It's not organized, meaning they're uniform in their acceptance of that risk. I'd say some companies are very good about it. In the U.S., if you are a defense contractor, for instance, or you have a U.S. government contract, you have to take more steps because the people you're hiring have knowledge and have access to information the government wants to keep secret. But if you're just a business selling widgets, a lot of times it's not on their radar until what? Oh, until something happens. And then it's way too late, right?
Yeah,
I find in my assessments, the low hanging fruit is it's just there for the taking. What I mean by that, the background check that they do on people of positions of trust is not very thorough. It's not as thorough as it should be. Meaning, they don't do developed references like we would do in the government. They don't check the credit rating on these individuals. They don't verify the things they're saying. That's not good. And what happens is something bad will happen, like you mentioned, bribery, blackmail, whatever, and then they're really doing a mitigate or coming back and going, oh God, how bad's the damage? And I think then a company will get more concerned about who they're hiring. But again, with regards to positions of trust or people with access, I don't see the compartmentalization that I saw in the government that I think businesses should be doing. They don't look at it that way.
yeah,
When I bring up confidentiality, they always look at me like, "What do you mean?"
yeah,
So like you mentioned Brian Thompson. If you read Luigi's diary, he talked about he used social engineering to find out where he was staying.
right,
What does that mean? He probably called,
yeah,
United Health saying, where are they staying for the shareholders meeting? And the
yeah,
person probably said the Hilton, right? Like sometimes it's that simple.
yeah,
And that's because there's not a culture, as you discussed, a culture of security, right?
yeah,
And so what I tell people is, first of all, we got to have confidentiality. We got to use aliases. When you get that suspicious phone call, you say, hey, why do you ask? Why are you interested? How can I help you? Don't be a source of information, right? But these are like things that when I say them, people are like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I'm like, how do you not know that already? That's low hanging fruit. That doesn't cost you anything to have a confidentiality program, but yet they don't, you know? I see it all the time where, you know, and I talked about it in my thing, you know, a CEO will sit for an interview with Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone or something, and they're giving away a day in the life. They're giving away where they're vulnerable, right? And you're like, what are you doing? Why are you giving up that type of information? And so when the company will go, oh, I never thought of it that way. Well, you have to think of it that way, you know, especially for us. I mean, I don't know kind of what the temperament is in the UK, but you know, one of the shocking things for us after Thompson and after Kirk is the acceptance of murder by the populace. You know, you've got 40% of Americans under 30 thought it was fine to kill Brian Thompson.
Yeah.
I mean, that's staggering.
Yeah,
right. It's staggering to think people are fine with you killing someone, killing them for words or for like Kirk is words or for the job the guy has.
Yeah.
Kill him. You know, and they're fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, it is shocking. It is shocking. I don't know where to go with that, and I think, you know, that's probably more a damning indictment of society globally at the moment than anything else, and
that's right.
Hopefully it doesn't continue on that trajectory. If we were to talk about sort of something that in the UK is always the security paradox of how do we quantify the return on investment of security? Because I know that was something you talked around. The influence on C-suite. I'd be interested on your take on how the best way to influence a C-suite to make the spends that is required balanced against, you know, I don't know, the bottom line, the profit margins, where this comes from, because security is not generating money, it's preventing a disaster. It's hard to quantify that, and people's memories are short.
Yes. Yeah. I thank you for that question, because I spent a lot of time in this area. The very first thing is the C-suite has to see the person as a professional. They have to. If you or me has the EP job, they have to look at us as a professional in our space. And we have to continue to prove that by our actions. I can't tell you how many assessments I've done where they've said, you know, those guys just sit over there and play on their phones. That's all they do. Right. Or they're in the car all the time, you know, talking on the phone. They're not going to have a favorable feeling towards them. And at the end of the year, they're probably going to let them go because they don't see the value. Right. And so what I teach teams to do is, first of all, establish yourself as a professional. So when you say something, it better be smart. Second, you know, give them, what do you do? Every single day, write a report. And I ask teams all the time, hey, when do you all write a report? A daily report, an instant report, any type of report? And they always say the same thing. Well, when something happens. Okay, well, what if nothing happens?
Yeah.
And a lot of teams, nothing happens, right?
Yeah.
Meaning not an incident. Okay. And how we define an incident, that's a good question. But by and large, they would say, we don't do a report unless something happens. Okay, well, in your mind, if nothing happens and you write nothing in 365 days, at the end of the year, that you have nothing to show for your work except a line item on the budget. Right. You're a cost center, right?
Yeah.
So what I tell them is do a daily report every single day. What do we put in there? You put in a surveillance detection routine that you did around the protectee's home. You do a internet search that you did that day for the protectee's name. You write in there that you cross-reference with HR who they were terminating this day. You're doing all of these different things. You're doing rounds of penetration testing of the corporate suite, making recommendations, camera blind spots daily, every single day, right? And at the end of the year, you got 365 reports. Now, no one will probably read them, but guess so what? Like you're working now, right? One of the best compliments I find is when, I'll ask the question to a CEO during a vulnerability assessment. Hey, what do you think of your EP team? Do you take them with you on vacation? That's my first question. Mm-hmm. And when they say, hell yeah, I wouldn't consider going anywhere without them, then I know what? He sees the value. He's getting return on investment. If he says, No, why the hell would I take them? He's not getting service. He's not getting return on investment. He doesn't think they know what they're doing. Right. So for me, that's so much of it, because unlike you, again, we don't really have a filter. Meaning in a C-suite, if you have a, chief, let's say the accountant, right? The accountant probably is a CPA and was probably spent some time at one of the big four accounting firms before he got hired at, say, McDonald's. Okay, there's a natural progression, right? Or a lawyer, the chief counsel for the corporation, went to a real high-end law school, passed the bar, did some time at a certain whatever, maybe the government, federal, U.S. attorney. And then he's now corporate counsel. That's a clear path. There is no such thing for EP. There isn't, right? And so we're already on our back foot because we don't have a clear path. Oh, he was in the Navy. He was an Army officer. He was FBI. He was whatever the hell.
Yeah.
We just don't have that credibility, right? And they don't listen to us, meaning they, and that's a whole nother discussion, but okay, we don't do them any favors. And here's what I mean by that. When someone comes up through the company, they become CEO, they have this mindset, like the guy at Home Depot. And I'm just saying because I read an article he did, I don't know him, but he grew up in Home Depot. Like he started stocking shelves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he said, I'm just, whatever his name is, I'm just that guy that started at Home Depot 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And the people around him let that false narrative fester. They don't have the courage to say, no, wait a minute. You are no longer that person.
Yeah.
You represent this company. You represent for good and for bad. Your entire position has changed. Right? But very rarely do they have a hard conversation like that. And so you have these people with a false sense thinking, no, there's no threat to me. I'm just so-and-so. No. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
This is where I think, Christophe de Margerie at Total Oil had come from the lower end. He'd been in that business for something like 30 years. Had never been in another business when he came CEO. And the only reason their shares bounced back quicker at 30 trading days, they were back above where they were when it happened, is because for 3 years prior, he'd been training his COO to take over from him. He was like 73 years old. So they knew that that's resilience modeling. But the COO took over. And so all the shareholders, thought, okay, ship steadies. But that is, the impact, knowing that, what affects you will affect the business is absolutely true. And I think you're right about career structure. And, in the UK, we talk about security profession, not just EP, but there is, it's not a profession.
Right.
I mean, there are some people out there who'll be throwing cups at the screen now. But the security industry is full of professional people acting professionally, but society doesn't see security as a profession the way it sees engineering or accountancy or medicine. There's no social contract. And that's where I think we struggle to evidence what we bring in terms of value. We could very easily do it by telling them all of the tragic, horrific things that will happen to them if they don't do what we say. But that's selling fear, and we can't sell fear, because if you start telling everybody about what terrorists are up to, they would never leave their homes, and that's, just giving into terrorism.
Right.
So, we have this this uphill battle of proving our worth. When we do our job well, nothing happens, and therefore people are like, well, why are we spending so much money on security? Nothing ever happens. I had a friend who mentioned the business, but it's retail. So, and we know fast-paced consumer goods and retail is probably the worst because it's all about the bottom line and margins are small. But this department was a hardware store and made the entire security department redundant. So, Home Depots all over the place. And the SOC was observing all of the cameras on all of these remote sites, and they stood everybody down. So who's responding to any alarm activation anywhere now? Nobody. and the shrinkage, the losses that they will experience, I'm sure, will go through the roof. Then they'll hire the security back in, but this team was so proficient, they saw it as a cost saving, but it's very short-sighted, and that's what we're up against, I think, in a lot of cases, whether EP or security, full stop.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad it's not just us. That's a global phenomenon. I know it is. I mean, I'm being a bit flippant, but I know, I've had the same conversations with Saudi and friends in India and Canada. It is a common thread. Yep. Security is a hard sell. It is what it is. We'll get there. Before we go, I mean, it would be remiss not to get your professional insight into the Bondi Beach attack. I don't know, it's hot off the press, but I just saw some things coming on my intelligence community about some arrests that have been made by Australian counter-terrorism policing, about another 5, I think, that they think we're heading up to Bondi to attack the mourners. Now, that is a horrific scenario, and thank God they've got hold of them now, if that's what they were going to do. But a secondary like that would be more terrifying than the first, if that wasn't bad enough. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, specifically the anti-Semitism that is on the rise is frightening. It's absolutely frightening. I don't see people speaking out about it. The people in positions of power speaking out of and actually putting action to the speech. Yeah. They say the right thing maybe after an event, but certainly their actions don't indicate any concern for anti-Semitism. Words lead to action, period. And we're seeing it here in the U.S., maybe not on the scale at Bondi, but we're seeing a lot of anti-Semitism. We're seeing a lot of people being targeted because they're Jewish. Secondary attack, that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. But unfortunately, look at governmental response. What they're going to do in Australia, I'm reading now, is, more gun control. Okay. So when the guys who are angry at Jews take knives and machetes, are you going to then what? Outlaw knives and machetes like you all done in your country?
Yep.
Right. But you're not dealing with the underlying problem, right? It's not the absolute, it's not the weapons as much as it is the hatred, right? These people hate. It. They're on the radar. These people aren't unknown, right? And invariably, it's in the U.S. too. You time and time again, they knew these people were those services, but it's hard. It's hard to have the especially in our place. The laws are hard to catch somebody preemptively. I think you all have a little bit more, but you got to have the courage to do so. But it doesn't surprise me. I got a call from GBN about Bondi, and I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised by it. Why are you surprised by it? And then I think, and just to finish, and I do want to talk about, arm protection in a second, but I do take a little bit of offense with let me say this more clearly. So everyone's calling the guy a hero that tackled the gunman, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, correct. But shouldn't we all do that? That's my problem, is it's become like a unicorn. When you see courage like that, because it is so rare, everyone goes, oh, look at this hero, that's great. Instead of, well, yeah, of course that's what would happen. We're not going to put up with that crap, right? That used to be the footing. It used to be, you're not going to do that here. You're not going to do that in the UK. You're not going to do that in Alabama. You're not going to do that in wherever, Bondi Beach, because you're going to get your head knocked in, right? But we're not there anymore. Now we're in a situation where we're praising a guy for doing what we should be doing. Stop the nonsense, right?
Yeah.
I think you'll see more of that. So, that doesn't surprise me, and I think you'll see more of it. 1,000,000%.
I think acts of bravery. I mean, for me, I've seen lots of acts of heroism when people didn't think about the consequences of what they were doing might have. Now, I don't know the guy that tackled him, Abbas, I think his name was. I didn't know he was an ex-Syrian policeman, I think. He's so he's from a a law enforcement background, probably has a higher protective instinct than most. But I think there is that's courage, knowing the consequences of what he did. That is courage.
Mm-hmm.
Though a lot of people work on instinct, and sometimes you don't stop and think. It's a type 1, type 2 brain thing, right? Speaking
Mm-hmm.
of Kahneman. And if you actually, some people, if they stop to think about the consequence of their action, that's when they falter and they don't do it. And that's the freezing in the headlights piece. But that was instinct. And it did risk his own life. It could have gone very badly for him. And if he'd have been shot by that person, then everybody'd be like, oh, that was just stupidity. There's a very thin line between stupidity and heroism in my experience. It's
and I think it's important. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think this is important. I think it's important that the government responds effectively. And I've seen this go both ways. What I mean by that is whatever Australia does, as far as the highest award they can give a civilian, whatever the hell that is, that's what that guy should get. It should be very public. It should be very, like really praise that guy up publicly. Give him money, give him an award, whatever. What I've seen in this country is guys do something like that, they get charged. They get charged criminally, right? For stepping in. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So then what's the government saying? The government saying, oh, don't act out. Don't be a hero. Don't show courage.
I see what you mean now with that context. Yes, I can see exactly what you're saying. That's a litigious sort of issue. I think that's probably quite indicative of the way that global society is going very protectionist and selfish in a lot of respects. And that's a very relevant point that we'd have to be very guarded against that. I think I would hate to see society go that way in everything, but we do see it, with our own police officers in the UK that will shoot an assailant and then get suspended pending an investigation into whether they did something wrong.
That's right.
When it's an instinctive thing, it's very hard to after the fact try and put yourself in that situation. But then like you say, you in the US, your EP guys are carrying firearms, and you said something which really resonates, because I've had one of these conversations on Optimal Talks with Ivan Ivanovich in Mexico City, who I know he's on the IPSB board as well. And you said when you only carry a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. Relating to guns, could you kind of explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, the carrying of that tool is because of our, the people that come into the space, the EP space, close protection, are from the military or law enforcement, by and large. Well, they are used to carrying a tool, and they use that tool all the time. Military and police use firearms all the time. And there's real evidence that those things help them do their job. There isn't any evidence that a firearm deployed by a close protection officer has any relevance in an anti-assassination role. None, right? And that's the problem is, if you have a team, multiple, protectors, and some are armed, fine. But as long as one who's on the body officer, we call him the body coverage officer, as long as they understand, I shouldn't be doing a gunfight here. I should be doing cover and evac. I should be grabbing the protectee and moving them off the X and moving them to cover. That's fine. But what I find in the US, because everyone has to be armed, they want to use that tool, right? So they teach nonsense like I showed in my presentation, where you're under attack and you're telling the protectee to stand behind you as you sling it and you get in a gunfight. Okay, well, that's nonsense. That's just nonsense. Hick's law tells us that we don't multitask well. We don't, right? And there's no way that the protectee is just going to stand behind you when all hell's breaking loose around you. The human body does not react that way. The human body does everything it can to stay safe, to get away from that. They're not going to stand behind you, right? That's crazy. So you're trying to do two things at once. And if you didn't have that firearm, and this is what I challenge people to do, if you didn't have that firearm and you just grab the protectee and move to cover, less rounds are going to hit you, period. That's a fact.
I agree.
And so I just have a real, now, and I think unfortunately people take my talk and they think I'm anti-gun, which I'm not, because I'm I love guns.
Yeah.
And I think guns have a real place like on fixed site security. Okay, so Breckenridge, Buckingham Palace, somebody breaks in, you don't know where the queen is. Yeah, you probably need to be armed, right?
Yeah.
So you can kill that guy who's
Yeah.
armed with a whatever. But on the street where I know exactly where that protectee is and my job is to protect them, I need to move them
Yeah.
right now, right? Not get in a gunfight right now when they're stationary and they're taking rounds. I'm actually being more of a risk. But when I talk that way, and the other thing is on the private side, you're not always going to be able to be armed. It's not like the military or the government where you can have a gun everywhere.
Yeah.
And so if your entire training is armed response, armed response, armed response, what do you do when you deploy to a certain state where you can't carry that gun? What are you going to do? You have to retrain yourself. Most people don't. Or crazier, they hire a stranger who's armed.
Yeah.
And they put that armed stranger in the car with their protectee.
Yes.
Right. Without verifying that they have any close protection training, without verifying that they're mentally stable, without verifying they know what the hell they're even doing.
Yeah.
So that's right. That's my concern with it. But unfortunately, in the US, I have an uphill battle on that conversation because we equate firearms to safety in America. We just think guns make the thing safer. The clients think this, and we have to re-educate them to, I always say, instead of saying you want to protect her to be armed, how about you want to protect her who's smart or a protector who's trained, protector who's knowledgeable? I mean,
oh yeah,
that's my problem with it. And I saw a story on Prince Harry and arm protection, and they kept talking about arm protection, arm protection, arm protection. I'm like, again, it doesn't really matter. Around the house, it does, but if he's out playing polo somewhere and you're on close protection and walking him from the car to the venue, certainly hope you're not getting in a gunfight with Harry standing next to you.
God, no.
Hopefully you're moving him to cover.
Yep.
And I was, and by the way, just lastly, how hard would it be to be on him or William after what happened to their mom? They'll never trust protection ever again after what happened,
No.
Maybe a long,
and I think you're right. More
struggle.
people hurt in road traffic accidents than firefights in UK. And I suspect probably, well, in fact, I know Mexico, that was the statistic. Safer driving is probably a bigger focus than, how fast you can draw.
Yeah.
In my experience, the only time we ever, so working in Iraq, everything was overt. You talk about Buckingham Palace, those weapons are overt. It's as much about the deterrent as it is the speed of response.
Yes.
Because you are, you're in you have a round in the chamber and you're safe to catch away, and the weapon is in front of you. And that's the difference. Whereas, other postings or embassies I've been to, that kit is away. In fact, in Congo, we couldn't even carry a weapon outside the embassy because the government was so paranoid about Westerners. Sure. You'd get arrested and probably executed for carrying a weapon outside the embassy. And that was, we're talking 99 here. Yeah. So you just don't want that kind of trouble. So you're absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of common sense coming out around this, thinking, challenging. And this is what we come back to the very beginning, challenging the perceptions and the narrative that, if you work in Mexico City, you should be armed. Well, no, actually, that you could be creating your own risks. And a risk-based approach to, proactive risk management around a risk event. And then the reactive piece in EP, I think the proactive piece is definitely the most important. You can't negate or neglect your crunchy skills, your open hand techniques, your defensive posture, your running away ability. But if you plan appropriately in the proactive risk management, you're reducing the chance that you'll ever have to practice those skills. And I think that's it should be heavily balanced like that.
Yes, sir.
I feel that, organizations like the IPSB are changing perceptions like that, because it's not a gung-ho organization. It is a collective of academics, so practitioners with academic experience and thinkers and thought leaders. And that's why, I'm pleased to be sort of aligned with you guys, and I wish you all the best. I got my email about the membership thing. I think that will be a smart move, and I look forward to seeing how that rolls out.
Good. We're grateful to have you.
Look, James, it's been an absolute privilege to have a good conversation with you. It was everything I hoped it would be. If anybody wants to get hold of you, they're traveling with their boss to the US, how would they get hold of you? What's your email address?
Yeah, it's james@hamiltonsecurity.group.com. That's all one word. And I believe in ridiculous responsiveness. So if you email me, I will respond very quickly and leave you better than I found you, for sure.
Superb. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to go make a cup of tea now because it's near the end of my day. And I'm going to get some cough tablets because I'm spreading lurgy a little bit. But no, it's been a pleasure. Let's stay in touch, and I'll maybe we'll do this again at some point.
That'd be great. Yes, sir.
Maybe get you over to the UK for something.
That'd be wonderful.
Right. If you liked what you heard here, there is a subscribe on the YouTube channel. Tell people about it. If you have a story and you want to have this conversation on Optimal Talks, then reach out. I'm always looking for interesting people I can learn from. We all learn from each other. But for now, James, thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.